The scream that shattered the Arizona afternoon wasn't part of any script, and that was what made Jackson Xavier drop the fence post he'd been hammering and grab his rifle without a second thought. He'd been working on the boundary fence of the ranch he'd been managing for the past 3 years, about 5 miles outside Bisbee, when the sound reached him. It was September of 1883, and the desert heat still hung heavy in the air, making everything shimmer in the distance. But that scream was clear as a church bell, and it came from somewhere near the rocky outcropping where travelers sometimes stopped to water their horses at the natural spring. Jackson was 26 years old, tall and weathered from years of working cattle drives and managing ranches across Arizona territory. His father had been a cavalry scout, and he'd learned to read the land like most men read newspapers. Right now, the land was telling him that someone was in serious trouble. He swung up onto his horse, a gray gelding named Smoke, and urged him into a gallop. The rocky terrain made it dangerous to move this fast, but that scream had carried real terror in it. As he rounded the outcropping, he could see what had caused it. A woman in a green traveling dress was backed up against the rocks, her parasol raised like a weapon, facing down 3 coyotes that had her cornered. One of them was larger than the others, probably the alpha, and it was moving closer with its head lowered. Behind her was an overturned buggy, one wheel still spinning slowly. A horse was nowhere to be seen, probably having bolted when the coyotes appeared. Jackson didn't waste time shouting. He fired a shot into the ground near the largest coyote, and the crack of the rifle sent all 3 animals scattering into the brush. He kept his rifle ready as he rode closer, making sure they were truly gone before dismounting. The woman had slid down against the rock face, her parasol falling from trembling hands. She was breathing hard, her face flushed from fear and heat. As Jackson approached, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 23 or 24, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins and was falling around her shoulders. "Are you hurt, miss?" Jackson asked, keeping his voice calm and steady. She looked up at him with eyes that were an unusual shade of amber, still wide with shock. "I don't think so. They came out of nowhere. My horse spooked and the buggy turned over and then they were there and I couldn't." "Easy now," Jackson said, offering his hand to help her up. "You're safe. Coyotes don't usually attack people unless they're starving or rabid, but these looked healthy enough. You probably just surprised them at their watering spot." She took his hand and stood, brushing dust from her dress with shaking fingers. Now that she was standing, Jackson could see she was tall for a woman, maybe 5'7" or 8. Her dress was expensive, too fine for traveling alone in the Arizona desert. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now. "I've never been so frightened in my life. Well, not in real life anyway." "Not in real life," Jackson repeated, moving to check on her overturned buggy. "I'm an actress," she explained, following him. "Marianne Hartford. I've played frightened women on stage dozens of times, but it's nothing like the real thing, nothing at all." Jackson examined the buggy. The axle was cracked, and one wheel was bent at an angle that meant it wasn't going anywhere. "Well, Miss Hartford, I'm afraid your buggy isn't going to get you where you were heading." "Where were you going, if you don't mind my asking?" "To Bisbee," Marianne said. "I'm supposed to perform at the Copper Queen Theater. We're doing a week of performances starting tomorrow night. The rest of the troupe went ahead yesterday, but I stayed behind in Tucson to visit some friends, and I thought I could make the journey today and—" She trailed off, looking at the broken buggy with dismay. "That's still a good 3 miles from here," Jackson said, "and it'll be getting dark in a few hours. I can take you into town on my horse, but we'll have to come back for your things tomorrow." "I have my costume trunk," Marianne said urgently, pointing to a large trunk that had been thrown from the buggy. "I can't perform without it." Jackson looked at the trunk, then at his horse, then back at Marianne. "We can't carry you, me, and that trunk all together." "Smoke's a good horse, but that's too much weight for 3 miles. "Then what do I do?" Marianne asked, and he could hear the edge of panic creeping back into her voice. "The performance is tomorrow. The troupe is counting on me." Jackson thought for a moment, looking at the sky. "All right, here's what we'll do. There's a line shack about a mile from here on the ranch I manage. It's got a roof and a stove and basic supplies. I can take you there, get you settled, then ride back to the ranch house, get a wagon and bring your trunk and whatever else you need into town tonight. It'll be after dark, but you'll have everything in time for your performance." Marianne looked uncertain. "A line shack? What's that?" "Small cabin where cowboys stay when they're working cattle in remote areas. Nobody's using it right now. You'll be safe there while I get the wagon." She bit her lip, considering. Jackson could see the debate playing out on her face. She didn't know him from Adam, and here he was suggesting she wait alone in a remote cabin, but her other options weren't exactly abundant. "You did just save me from those coyotes," she said finally. "And I suppose I don't have much choice. But please, if you could hurry. I really do need that trunk." "I'll be as quick as I can," Jackson promised. He secured his rifle in its scabbard, then helped Marianne up onto Smoke. She sat side saddle, and he mounted behind her, keeping a respectful distance but necessarily close enough to handle the reins. As they rode toward the line shack, Jackson was very aware of Marianne's presence in front of him. She held herself stiffly at first, clearly uncomfortable with the intimacy of riding double, but gradually she relaxed a bit. "I've been acting since I was 16, she said suddenly, as if she needed to fill the silence. "Started in Philadelphia, did a circuit through the eastern cities, then came west 2 years ago. I've been all over San Francisco, Sacramento, Denver, but this is my first time in Arizona territory." "What do you think of it so far?" Jackson asked. She laughed, and it was a nice sound despite the circumstances. "Well, setting aside the near-death experience, it's more desolate than I imagined, but beautiful in its own way. All this open space, these strange rocks and cacti, it's like another world. It can be hard country," Jackson agreed. "Hot and dry most of the year, cold at night even when the days are scorching. But once you get to know it, there's nowhere else quite like it. You sound like you love it here." "I do. Grew up in Texas, but I've been in Arizona territory for 8 years now. Feels like home." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and then the line shack came into view. It was a small structure made of adobe and wood, sitting in the shade of some mesquite trees near a seasonal creek that was currently dry. Jackson helped Marianne down, then dismounted himself and unlocked the door. Inside, the shack was simple but clean. There was a narrow cot, a small table with 2 chairs, a wood stove, and some shelves with canned goods and basic supplies. A window with shutters looked out toward the distant mountains. "I know it's not fancy," Jackson said, "but it's safe and it's shelter." "It's fine," Marianne said, looking around with what seemed like genuine interest. "Actually, it's rather charming in a rustic way. Like a set for a frontier play." Jackson showed her where the water barrel was, and the lamp oil and how to work the stove if she got cold. "Keep the door locked after I leave," he instructed, "and don't go wandering outside. Those coyotes probably won't come back, but there's other things out there you don't want to meet alone." "How long will you be?" Jackson checked his pocket watch. It was nearly 4 o'clock. "It'll take me about 45 minutes to ride back to the ranch house, another 30 minutes to hitch up the wagon and load your trunk, then about an hour and a half back to town with the wagon. Figure I'll be at the Copper Queen Theater by 8 o'clock at the latest." Where should I take your trunk? The theater would be perfect. Someone from the troupe should be there. If not, the manager, Mr. Pemberton, will know where to store it safely. Jackson nodded. I'll get it done. You just stay here and rest. There's beans and bacon in those cans if you get hungry. I can't thank you enough, Mr. Xavier, Marianne said. You probably saved my life out there. Just Jackson is fine, and you're welcome, Miss Hartford. Marianne, she corrected with a small smile, if we're being informal. Jackson found himself smiling back. Even dusty and disheveled from her ordeal, there was something striking about her. It wasn't just that she was pretty, though she certainly was. There was an animation to her features, an expressiveness that he supposed came from her profession. All right then, Marianne. I'll see you later. He rode Smoke hard back to the ranch house, where he found the ranch owner's son, Tommy, working in the barn. Jackson explained what had happened, leaving out some of the details about Marianne being an actress. Tommy was a good kid but a gossip, and Jackson didn't want the whole town talking before Marianne had even arrived. Take whatever you need, Tommy said. Pa won't mind. Probably do him good knowing we helped a lady in distress. Jackson hitched up the wagon, grabbed some blankets and a couple of lanterns, then made the journey back to where Marianne's buggy still sat overturned. Loading the heavy trunk by himself took some doing, but he managed it, along with 2 smaller bags and a hat box. He took a moment to right the buggy and secure it as best he could so it wouldn't be further damaged by weather or animals. Someone could come back with proper equipment to haul it in later. By the time he reached Bisbee, full darkness had fallen. The town was alive with evening activity. Saloons spilling light and music into the street. Miners heading home from the late shift at the copper mines that had given the town its prosperity. The Copper Queen Theater was on the main street, a relatively new building that someone had spent good money on. It had real glass windows and a painted sign that looked professional. Jackson pulled the wagon up to the front entrance and went inside. The lobby was carpeted, with gas lamps on the walls and posters advertising the upcoming performances. An evening of dramatic scenes, one poster proclaimed, featuring the acclaimed Marianne Hartford and the Boston Repertory Players. A thin man with spectacles and a worried expression was pacing near the ticket booth. He turned when Jackson entered, hope lighting his face. "Can I help you?" the man asked. "Are you Mr. Pemberton? I have Miss Hartford's costume trunk. There was an accident on the road." "Oh, thank heavens." "Is she all right?" "Where is she?" Jackson explained about the broken buggy and the line shack, carefully editing the story to make it sound less dramatic than it had been. No need to worry the man unnecessarily. "I can go fetch her right now and have her here within 2 hours, Jackson offered. Mr. Pemberton looked enormously relieved. "That would be wonderful. We've been worried sick. She was supposed to arrive this morning, and when the stage from Tucson came without her, we didn't know what to think. She took a private buggy, wanted to make the trip at her own pace," Jackson explained. With the theater manager's help, Jackson unloaded the trunk and bags, which were stored in a dressing room backstage. Then he headed back out into the night, stopping at a restaurant to grab some sandwiches and a canteen of fresh coffee before making the return trip to the line shack. When he knocked on the door and called out his name, he heard Marianne's relieved voice from inside. She unlatched the door and opened it, lamplight spilling out into the darkness. "You came back," she said, and there was something in her voice that made Jackson wonder if she'd really believed he would. "Told you I would. Got your trunk safely to the theater, spoke to Mr. Pemberton. He's mighty relieved you're safe, and I brought food, figured you'd be hungry." "Starving, actually," Marianne admitted. "I was looking at those cans of beans, but I couldn't quite work out how to open them." Jackson showed her how to use the can opener while he unpacked the sandwiches. They ate sitting at the small table, and Jackson poured them both coffee from the canteen. "This is the best meal I've had in weeks," Marianne said, and she seemed to mean it despite the simplicity of the food. "Everything at the hotels and restaurants has been so fancy and fussy. This is just good and simple and exactly what I needed." "Long tour?" Jackson asked. "6 months so far, with 3 more to go. We're doing smaller towns now, places that don't see much theater. Mr. Pemberton thinks there's good money to be made in mining towns, where men are hungry for entertainment and culture. He's probably right about that. Bisbee's doing well with the copper mines, lots of money flowing through town." They talked while they ate, and Jackson found himself enjoying the conversation more than he'd expected. Marianne had a quick wit and a way of telling stories that made even ordinary events sound entertaining. She told him about near disasters during performances, about the time a prop gun misfired and singed the leading man's wig, about the town in Colorado where they'd performed in a saloon because there was no proper theater. In turn, Jackson found himself talking about ranch life, about the cattle drives he'd been on, about the time he'd tracked a mountain lion that had been killing calves and found it had a broken paw and was simply too injured to hunt properly. He'd put it out of its misery rather than let it starve. "That must have been hard," Marianne said softly. "It was the right thing to do, didn't make it easy though." She looked at him across the table, her amber eyes thoughtful in the lamplight. "You're very different from the men I usually meet. The actors I know, they're always performing, even offstage. Everything is dramatic, everything is for effect, but you're just yourself. There's no pretense to you." Jackson wasn't quite sure how to respond to that. "I suppose when you spend most of your time with cattle and horses, you learn there's no point in pretending. Animals see right through that sort of thing." "It's refreshing," Marianne said. "Like this whole day has been in a strange way, terrifying, yes, but also real. More real than anything I've experienced in months, maybe years." They finished eating and cleaned up, and then Jackson helped Marianne up onto Smoke once more. The ride to Bisbee took longer in the darkness, but the moon was bright, and Jackson knew the trail well. Marianne was less stiff this time, settling more naturally against him, and Jackson tried not to think too much about how right it felt to have her there. By the time they reached the theater, it was nearly 11 o'clock. Mr. Pemberton was still there, waiting anxiously with 2 other members of the troupe, a middle-aged woman and a young man with an actor's good looks and carefully pomaded hair. "Marianne, thank God!" the woman exclaimed, rushing forward as Jackson helped Marianne down from the horse. "We've been beside ourselves with worry. I'm fine, Catherine, truly. Just a small adventure on the road. This is Jackson Xavier. He saved me from some wild animals and brought me safely here." The young man, who introduced himself as Desmond Winters, shook Jackson's hand with what seemed like excessive vigor. "We're in your debt, sir, truly in your debt. Marianne is our star, absolutely irreplaceable." Jackson noticed the way Desmond looked at Marianne, with a proprietary sort of admiration, and felt an unexpected twinge of something that might have been jealousy. "Just glad I was nearby to help," Jackson said. "If you all don't need anything else, I should be getting back." "Wait," Marianne said, catching his arm. "The performance tomorrow night. Will you come, please? I'd like you to see what I do, and it's the least I can offer as a thank you." Jackson hesitated. He wasn't much for theater, never had been. But the way Marianne was looking at him, hopeful and earnest, made it impossible to refuse. "I'd be honored," he said. Her smile was radiant. "Wonderful. I'll leave a ticket at the box office for you. Come a bit early if you can, around 7. The performance starts at 7:30. Jackson tipped his hat to the group and rode back out into the night, his mind full of thoughts of amber eyes and dark hair, and a woman who somehow seemed both worldly and vulnerable at the same time. The next day dragged by with unusual slowness. Jackson went about his work at the ranch, checking fences, moving cattle to a new grazing area, helping Tommy repair a section of the barn roof that had been damaged in a recent storm. But his mind kept wandering to the evening ahead, to the theater and the performance and seeing Marianne again. He rode into Bisbee around 6:30, having cleaned up as best he could and put on his good shirt, the dark blue one without any patches or stains. He even shaved, which Tommy noticed and ribbed him about mercilessly. The theater was busier than it had been the night before, with well-dressed townspeople arriving in carriages and on foot. Jackson felt out of place in his cowboy clothes among the suits and fancy dresses, but the young woman at the box office found his ticket right away and welcomed him warmly. Inside, the theater was even more impressive. There were rows of seats upholstered in red velvet, and the stage had a proper curtain with painted scenery behind it. Gas footlights ran along the front of the stage, and chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Jackson found his seat, which was in the 5th row, closer to the stage than he'd expected. The theater filled up quickly, and by 7:30 nearly every seat was taken. The lights dimmed, and a man Jackson recognized as Mr. Pemberton stepped out in front of the curtain to welcome the audience and introduce the program. The evening consisted of several dramatic scenes from various famous plays. The other actors were good, Jackson supposed, though he didn't have much basis for comparison. They spoke in grand, carrying voices and moved with exaggerated gestures that seemed designed to reach the back row. Then Marianne took the stage for a scene from something called The Lady of the Camellias, and Jackson understood immediately why she was the star. Where the others were performing, she was simply being. Even from 5 rows back, he could see every subtle emotion that crossed her face. When her character laughed, it sounded like real joy. When she cried, the tears seemed genuine. Her voice didn't boom artificially, it simply carried clear and true and full of feeling. The scene was about a woman saying goodbye to the man she loved, sacrificing her own happiness for his future. By the end of it, Jackson wasn't alone in being moved. He could hear people around him sniffling, and there was a moment of awed silence before the applause began, louder and longer than it had been for any previous scene. Marianne performed in 2 more scenes during the evening, and each time Jackson found himself completely absorbed. There was something almost intimate about watching her work, about seeing the way she transformed herself into these different characters, while still somehow remaining essentially herself underneath it all. When the performance ended and the troupe took their bows, Marianne's eyes scanned the audience. When she found Jackson, her face lit up with a genuine smile that was different from her performer's smile, and she gave him a small, almost shy wave. After the curtain fell, Jackson wasn't sure what to do. Should he leave? Should he wait? The decision was made for him when Mr. Pemberton appeared at his elbow. "Mr. Xavier, Miss Hartford asked if you would wait a few moments. She'd like to see you if you have time." Jackson did have time. In fact, he had all the time in the world. He waited in the lobby while the theater slowly emptied, watching the well-dressed theater-goers depart into the night, still chattering enthusiastically about the performances. After about 20 minutes, Marianne emerged from a side door. She'd changed out of her costume into a simpler dress of dark blue that somehow made her eyes look even more golden. Her hair was pinned up neatly now, and she'd wiped away the stage makeup. "You came," she said, approaching him with that same smile from the stage. "Wouldn't have missed it." "You were wonderful. All of you were, but you especially." She blushed slightly, which surprised him. "Thank you. I wasn't sure what you'd think. It's not exactly cowboy entertainment." "Maybe not, but it was something special. The way you made those characters feel real, like they were actual people with actual feelings, not just words on a page. That takes real skill." Marianne's expression shifted into something softer, more vulnerable. "That means more to me than you might think. Most people just say nice things about my voice or my costumes. You actually understood what I was trying to do." They stood there in the emptying lobby, just looking at each other for a moment that stretched longer than it probably should have. "The troupe is having a late supper at the hotel," Marianne said. "Would you join us? They all want to thank you properly for helping me yesterday." Jackson started to decline, feeling out of place with theater people, but something in Marianne's expression stopped him. She wanted him there. Not the troupe, but her. "I'd like that," he said. The hotel dining room had been reserved for the group, and Jackson found himself seated between Marianne and Catherine, who turned out to be both an actress and the troupe's costume designer. Desmond Winters sat across from them, along with several other troupe members Jackson hadn't met yet. The conversation was lively and often incomprehensible to Jackson, full of theatrical references and inside jokes. But Marianne made sure to include him, explaining things when he looked confused, asking him questions about his own work and experiences. Desmond seemed less pleased by Jackson's presence. He kept steering the conversation back to theater matters, often speaking directly to Marianne as if Jackson wasn't there. "The scene from Camille was inspired tonight, darling," Desmond said, reaching across the table as if to take Marianne's hand. "You were luminous. I told Mr. Pemberton we should extend our run here if the ticket sales continue like this." "That's kind of you, Desmond, but you know we have commitments in Tombstone next week," Marianne replied, pulling her hand back to reach for her water glass. "Tombstone," Jackson said. "That's rough country, especially for a theater troupe. The town's settled down some since the troubles at the OK Corral a couple years back, but it's still got an edge to it." "We've played rough towns before," Desmond said with a dismissive wave. "The rougher the better, I say. More character, more stories to tell later. It's different when you're performing versus when you're living it," Jackson said quietly. "No curtain to hide behind when things go wrong." "Are you suggesting we can't handle ourselves?" Desmond's tone had sharpened. "Desmond, please," Marianne interjected. Jackson wasn't insulting us. He was expressing legitimate concern. "We appreciate it," she added, turning to Jackson. "But we'll have Mr. Pemberton with us, and we've been through mining towns and frontier settlements before. We'll be all right." The conversation moved on, but Jackson noticed that Marianne seemed quieter after that exchange. When the supper finally broke up around midnight, she walked with him out to the front of the hotel where smoke was tied. "I'm sorry about Desmond," she said. "He can be protective of the troupe. We've all been together for over a year now, and I think he sees us as his theatrical family." "Is he?" Jackson wasn't sure how to phrase the question. "Are you and he?" "No," Marianne said quickly. "He'd like us to be, I think. He's asked me to dinner privately several times, suggested we might form a more permanent partnership, both professionally and personally. But I don't feel that way about him. He's a good actor and a friend, but nothing more." Jackson felt relieved out of proportion to what the information should have meant to him. He'd known this woman for barely a day, after all. "I leave for Tombstone in 5 days," Marianne continued. "We have 3 more performances here, then we travel." "I don't suppose you ever make it over that way." "I could," Jackson said. "Ranch I manage runs cattle through that area sometimes. Could be I'd need to check on some stock next week." Marianne smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I'd like that. I'd like to see you again." "So would I." They stood close in the warm night air, the sounds of Bisbee's nightlife humming around them. Jackson wanted to kiss her, wanted it with a sudden fierce intensity that surprised him. But it was too soon, and she was leaving, and everything about this situation was complicated. Instead, he took her hand and bowed over it slightly, old-fashioned and formal. "Good night, Marianne. I'll see you again before you leave." "Good night, Jackson." Over the next 4 days, Jackson found excuses to be in Bisbee every evening. He saw 2 more performances, each time marveling at Marianne's talent. They had coffee together after the shows, sometimes with other troupe members, sometimes alone. They talked about everything and nothing, discovering shared opinions about surprisingly many things. Marianne told him about growing up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a bookkeeper and a seamstress, who hadn't quite known what to make of their daughter's theatrical ambitions. She described the first time she'd stepped on stage at 16, in a small production at a local church, and how she'd felt like she'd finally found where she belonged. Jackson told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about his mother dying when he was 12 and his father raising him and his 2 brothers alone. About how he'd headed west after his father passed, looking for something he couldn't quite name but would know when he found it. "Have you found it?" Marianne asked. "I think maybe I'm getting close," Jackson said, looking at her in a way that made his meaning clear. On the last day before the troupe was scheduled to leave for Tombstone, Jackson took Marianne riding. She'd mentioned wanting to see more of the desert country, and he borrowed a gentle mare from the ranch for her to ride. They rode out to a high point overlooking a valley, where the view stretched for miles in every direction. Marianne was quiet, taking it all in with the same focused attention she gave to her performances. "It's so big," she said finally. "So empty and big and open. You could disappear out here and never be found." "That's what some people come west for," Jackson said. "The chance to disappear, to start over, to be someone new." "Is that what you wanted?" "Maybe at first. But now I think I just wanted to be myself without having to fit anyone else's expectations. Out here, you're judged by what you can do and how you treat people, not by your family name or your bank account." Marianne was quiet for a long moment. "I've spent so long pretending to be other people that sometimes I forget who I actually am. On stage, I'm whoever the role requires. Off stage, I'm the actress, the performer, playing the part of the sophisticated traveling artist. But with you, I don't feel like I'm playing a part, I just feel like me." "Does that make sense?" "It does," Jackson said. "More than you know." She turned to look at him, and in the clear daylight he could see little flecks of green in her amber eyes. "I don't want to leave tomorrow." "Then stay." "I can't. I have commitments, contracts. The troupe is counting on me." "I know, but after, when the tour is done." "Would you consider coming back here, to Bisbee, to me?" Marianne drew in a sharp breath. "Jackson, we've only known each other 4 days." "I know. And if you think I'm crazy for feeling what I'm feeling this fast, you're probably right, but I've never met anyone like you, Marianne. I've never felt this way about anyone, and if there's even a chance you might feel the same, I had to tell you before you left." She reached across the space between their horses and took his hand. "I do feel the same. It's terrifying and doesn't make any logical sense, but I do. These 4 days with you have felt more real than the last 4 years of my life." Jackson dismounted and helped Marianne down, and then finally, standing in the desert with nothing but sky and stone around them, he kissed her. It was gentle at first, questioning, and then deeper as she responded, her arms coming up around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marianne pressed her forehead against his chest. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. "You're going to go to Tombstone and finish your tour, and I'm going to come visit when I can. And we're going to figure this out together because this is too good to walk away from. Promise, promise." They rode back to Bisbee slowly, reluctant to end the day. That evening, Jackson attended the troup's final performance, and afterward helped them load their wagons for the journey to Tombstone the next morning. Desmond watched Jackson's interactions with Marianne with barely concealed displeasure, but he kept his opinions to himself. Catherine, on the other hand, pulled Jackson aside at one point. "You care about her," she said. "It wasn't a question." "I do." "Good. She deserves someone who sees her as a person, not just a performer. Just don't hurt her. This life is hard enough without heartbreak added to it." "I won't hurt her. Not if I can help it. See that you don't." The next morning, Jackson was at the hotel before dawn to see the troupe off. Marianne came down in a traveling dress of deep green, her hair in a practical braid, looking both excited for the journey and sad to be leaving. "I'll be in Tombstone by next week at the latest," Jackson promised, holding both her hands. "Probably sooner." "I'll be watching for you," Marianne said. "And Jackson, thank you. For saving me, yes, but also for reminding me what it feels like to be real." He kissed her goodbye in front of the whole troupe, not caring who saw or what they thought. Then he watched the wagons roll out of Bisbee, heading southwest toward Tombstone, feeling like something vital was leaving with them. True to his word, Jackson made the journey to Tombstone 6 days later. He'd arranged with the ranch owner to take a few days for personal business, and though Tommy gave him knowing looks, nobody asked too many questions. Tombstone was bigger than Bisbee and rougher around the edges, despite attempts to civilize it. The silver mines had brought wealth and people, but also violence and vice. The notorious gunfight at the OK Corral had happened just 2 years earlier, and while things had calmed down considerably, there was still an edge to the town that set Jackson's teeth on edge. The troupe was performing at Skiffilin Hall, a large building that served as both theater and community center. Jackson arrived in the early afternoon and found Marianne rehearsing on stage with Desmond. They were running through a scene that involved considerable physical closeness, and Jackson felt that twinge of jealousy again watching Desmond's hands on Marianne's waist. But then Marianne saw him standing at the back of the hall, and her face transformed with joy. She broke away from Desmond mid-scene and ran down the steps from the stage, not caring about propriety or audience, and threw herself into Jackson's arms. "You came. I wasn't sure you would, wasn't sure I hadn't imagined the whole thing." "Not a chance," Jackson said, holding her tight. "I told you I'd come." Desmond appeared behind Marianne, his expression stormy. "We're in the middle of rehearsal, Marianne. Mr. Pemberton is paying for this hall time." "Then rehearse around me for a bit," Marianne said, not even looking back at him. "I'll be back in 20 minutes." She pulled Jackson outside into the dusty street, laughing with obvious happiness. "I'm sorry, that was unprofessional of me, but I've been counting the hours until you got here. Don't apologize. I've been doing the same." They walked through Tombstone together, Marianne showing him the sights she'd discovered in the past few days. The town was busy with afternoon commerce, miners and merchants and cowboys all mixing together on the boardwalks. Jackson stayed alert, years of frontier living making him automatically aware of his surroundings. That awareness saved them when a drunk stumbled out of a saloon directly into Marianne's path. Jackson pulled her aside smoothly, keeping himself between her and the drunk man, who muttered something incomprehensible and staggered off. "You're always protecting me," Marianne observed. "Can't seem to help myself." They had dinner at a restaurant that was trying hard to be respectable, with tablecloths and actual menus. Marianne told him about the performances in Tombstone, which had been well attended but rougher than Bisbee. Some of the audience members had been quite drunk, and someone had thrown a flower at the stage that had nearly hit Catherine. "That's actually considered a compliment," Marianne explained at Jackson's outraged expression, though usually they wait until the end of the performance. After dinner, Jackson attended that night's show. Marianne was brilliant as always, but he found himself less able to relax and enjoy the performance. Some of the men in the audience were indeed quite drunk, and their catcalls and comments during the romantic scenes set Jackson's jaw tight. After the performance, the troupe gathered their things to head back to their hotel. Jackson walked with them, and it was probably his presence that deterred the group of miners who'd been eyeing Marianne and Catherine outside the theater. "You're like a guard dog," Marianne teased gently as they reached the hotel. "More like a concerned friend," Jackson replied. "Is that what we are, friends?" He looked down at her in the lamplight spilling from the hotel windows. "I think we're a bit more than that, at least I hope we are." "So do I," she whispered. Jackson stayed in Tombstone for 3 days, spending every moment he could with Marianne. He attended all the performances, walked with her during the days, and slowly got to know the other troupe members better. Catherine warmed to him considerably. Even Mr. Pemberton seemed to approve of his presence, perhaps because Jackson helped deter some of the rougher elements that frequented the theater. Only Desmond remained coldly polite, and on Jackson's last evening in Tombstone, the actor finally confronted him directly. Jackson had gone back to the theater after dinner to walk Marianne back to the hotel, and he found Desmond alone on the stage, practicing lines. "You're very persistent," Desmond said without preamble, "following us from town to town." "I'm visiting someone I care about," Jackson replied evenly. "Marianne has a career, a life in the theater. What can you possibly offer her? A ranch hand's wages, a life of isolation in the desert. That's for Marianne to decide, not you or me. She's destined for great things. New York, perhaps even London. Do you really think she'll give all that up for you?" The words hit harder than Jackson wanted to admit because they echoed his own fears. What did he have to offer someone like Marianne? He owned almost nothing, worked for wages, had no prospects beyond the next ranch job. But before he could formulate a response, Marianne's voice came from the entrance to the theater. "Desmond, that's enough." She walked down the aisle toward them, her expression angrier than Jackson had ever seen it. "You don't speak for me or make decisions about my future," she said to Desmond. "And you certainly don't question the people I choose to spend time with." "I'm trying to protect you," Desmond said. "We all are. This is your future you're risking." "No, you're trying to control me. There's a difference. I appreciate your concern, truly. But my life is mine to live and my choices are mine to make." Desmond looked between Marianne and Jackson, his handsome face twisted with frustration and something that might have been hurt. "He'll break your heart, or you'll break his. Either way, it ends badly." "Maybe," Marianne said quietly. "But it's my heart to risk." Desmond left the theater without another word, and Marianne sagged slightly, as if the confrontation had taken all her energy. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," she said to Jackson. "Don't be. But he's not entirely wrong, you know. What can I offer you compared to what you already have?" Marianne came to stand directly in front of him, taking both his hands. "Jackson Xavier, you saved my life. More than that, you've reminded me that there's more to life than just playing roles. With you, I'm not the actress or the star or the sophisticated artist. I'm just Marianne, and that's enough. Do you know how rare that is, how precious? But your career, your future plans, will adjust. I'm not saying I want to quit acting tomorrow. I love what I do. But maybe I don't have to do it the way I have been, always traveling, never putting down roots. There are other possibilities." "Like what?" "I don't know yet. But I want to figure it out with you if you'll let me." Jackson pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. The next morning, Jackson had to return to Bisbee and the ranch. The goodbye was harder this time, knowing it would be longer before they saw each other again. The troup's tour would take them through several more towns over the next 2 months before circling back toward Bisbee and the larger towns in that area. "I'll write," Marianne promised. "Every town we stop in, I'll send you letters." "I'll write back," Jackson said, "though I'm not much with words on paper. Just tell me about your days. That'll be enough." They kissed goodbye in the early morning light, neither wanting to let go. Finally, Jackson forced himself to mount Smoke and ride away, looking back to see Marianne standing in front of the hotel, one hand raised in farewell. The weeks that followed were both wonderful and torturous. Letters arrived regularly at the ranch, sometimes 2 or 3 at once when the mail caught up from different towns. Marianne wrote about the performances, the places they visited, the people they met. But mostly she wrote about missing Jackson, about counting down the days until they'd see each other again. Jackson wrote back, his letters shorter and less eloquent, but just as heartfelt. He told her about the work at the ranch, about a new foal that had been born, about the desert storms that rolled through. He told her about the plans he was making, money he was saving, ideas he was forming about the future, because Jackson had decided something during those weeks apart. If Marianne was willing to adjust her life to be with him, then he needed to offer her something more than a ranch hand's uncertain existence. He began seriously saving money, talking to people about opportunities, investigating what it would take to buy some land of his own. The ranch owner, Mr. Hastings, noticed the change in Jackson's demeanor and questioned him about it one evening. "Got something on your mind, son?" the older man asked. Jackson explained about Marianne, about wanting to build something more permanent, something that could support a future. Mr. Hastings listened thoughtfully, then made a surprising offer. "I've got a section of land on the North Range that's been sitting unused. Good water, decent grazing. I was planning to sell it eventually. You interested in buying it? I could give you favorable terms, take payments over time. You've been a good foreman, and I'd rather see that land go to someone I trust." It was more than Jackson had hoped for. The terms Mr. Hastings offered were generous, and the land was good. It would be years of hard work to build it into a proper ranch, but it was possible. It was a future. Jackson wrote to Marianne immediately, telling her about the opportunity, about his plans and hopes. Her response came back faster than usual, full of excitement and encouragement. She believed in him, believed in them, and that faith made everything seem achievable. Finally, after 9 long weeks, the troop circuit brought them back to the Bisbee area. They were scheduled for another week of performances at the Copper Queen Theater, and Jackson could barely contain his anticipation. When the troop's wagons rolled into town, Jackson was there waiting. Marianne practically leaped from the wagon, and Jackson caught her, spinning her around right there in the street while Tommy whistled in cattails from onlookers. "I missed you," Marianne said against his neck. "Letters aren't enough. They're wonderful, but not enough. I know. I missed you too. So much." That evening, after Marianne had settled into her hotel room and prepared for the performance, Jackson took her to see the land Mr. Hastings was selling him. They rode out in the late afternoon, when the light turned everything golden and the heat of the day was fading. The land was beautiful in that stark desert way, with rocky outcroppings and scattered vegetation and a small creek that ran year-round. There was a slight rise where a house could be built to catch the breezes, and a natural hollow perfect for a barn and corrals. "What do you think?" Jackson asked, suddenly nervous about her reaction. Marianne turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "I think it's perfect. I think you could build something wonderful here." "We could build something wonderful here," Jackson corrected. "If you wanted to, if you were willing to." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "Jackson, are you asking what I think you're asking?" He'd planned to be more romantic about this, to wait for the perfect moment, to have something more than just words to offer. But standing there on land that could be their future, with Marianne looking at him with those amber eyes full of hope and love, Jackson couldn't wait any longer. He took both her hands in his. "Marianne Hartford, I know we haven't known each other long by normal standards. I know I'm asking you to give up a lot, to change your whole life. But I love you. I've loved you since the moment I saw you facing down those coyotes with nothing but a parasol and courage. I want to build a life with you, here on this land if you'll have it, or anywhere else if you'd prefer. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to hear about your day and tell you about mine. I want to support your dreams and build new dreams together. Will you marry me?" Marianne's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes. Yes, Jackson, I'll marry you. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. And this land, this future you're building, it's more than I ever imagined wanting. The answer is yes." Jackson kissed her then, long and deep and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Marianne was laughing and crying at the same time. "I have to finish the tour," she said. "I owe the troupe that much. We have 8 more weeks of scheduled performances, but after that I'm yours, completely yours." "I'll wait," Jackson said. "I'd wait forever if I had to." "You won't have to. Just 8 more weeks, and then we start our real life together." The week of performances in Bisbee was both joyful and bittersweet. Marianne told the troupe about her engagement, and reactions were mixed. Catherine was delighted, immediately starting to plan what Marianne should wear for the wedding. Mr. Pemberton was disappointed to be losing his star, but wished them well. Desmond was coldly silent for 2 days before finally offering stiff congratulations and admitting that if Marianne had to throw away her career for love, at least Jackson seemed like a decent man. "I'm not throwing away my career," Marianne corrected gently. "I'm changing it. There are other ways to be an actress besides touring constantly. Maybe I'll start a theater here, or teach, or perform in local productions. The art doesn't go away just because the lifestyle changes." The final 8 weeks of the tour were the longest of Jackson's life. He couldn't travel with the troupe. His responsibilities at the ranch didn't allow for that much absence, but he met them when he could, riding out to whatever town they were performing in for a night or two before returning to his work. They were married 3 days after the tour officially ended, in a small ceremony at the church in Bisbee. Marianne wore a dress that Catherine had made, cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Jackson wore a new suit that he'd bought specially for the occasion, dark and formal and uncomfortable, but worth it to see the way Marianne smiled when she saw him waiting at the altar. Catherine and Tommy stood up with them as witnesses. Mr. Pemberton attended, as did most of the troupe, who had decided to take a week's rest in Bisbee before starting their next tour circuit. Even Desmond came, and he shook Jackson's hand afterward with what seemed like genuine warmth. "Take care of her," he said quietly. "With my life," Jackson promised. They spent their wedding night at the hotel in Bisbee, in the finest room available, and Jackson was terrified he'd disappoint her. But Marianne was patient and loving, and whatever inexperience they both brought to their marriage bed, they made up for with tenderness and genuine affection for each other. In the morning, lying in the tangle of sheets with early light streaming through the window, Marianne traced patterns on Jackson's chest and said, "Do you know what the best part of all this is?" "What's that?" "I don't have to pretend anymore. For years, I've been playing roles, being whoever the script required. Even offstage, I was playing the part of the successful actress, the sophisticated traveler. But with you, I can just be myself. Marianne Xavier." Just a woman who loves her husband and is excited about the life they're building together. Marianne Xavier, Jackson repeated, trying out the sound of her new name. I like it. So do I. They moved into a small house in town temporarily while Jackson began the work of building on his land. He hired a crew to help with the construction, and Marianne surprised him by working alongside them, learning to hammer nails and mix mortar with the same dedication she'd once brought to memorizing lines. She also began teaching drama classes to the children of Bisbee, using a spare room at the church. At first, it was just a few students, but word spread, and soon she had a dozen children coming twice a week to learn about theater and performance. She loved it, Jackson could see, loved sharing her art in this more intimate, lasting way. 8 months after their wedding, the house on Jackson's land was finally finished. It wasn't large, just 4 rooms and a porch, but it was solid and well built and theirs. They moved in on a sunny March day in 1884, carrying boxes and furniture with help from Tommy and some of the ranch hands. That night, sitting on their porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple, Marianne made an announcement. I'm pregnant, she said quietly. Jackson's heart seemed to stop and then start again at double speed. You're sure? The doctor confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to wait until we were in our house to tell you. We're going to have a baby, Jackson, in about 6 months. He pulled her close, overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure. A baby. A child. The responsibility seemed enormous, but looking at Marianne's glowing face, he couldn't imagine anything more right. We're going to need more rooms, he said, making her laugh. Eventually, yes. But we have time. Their son was born in September, a healthy baby with a lusty cry and his mother's amber eyes. They named him James, after Jackson's father, and from the moment Jackson held that tiny, squirming bundle, he understood what it meant to have your heart walking around outside your body. Marianne took to motherhood with the same passion she brought to everything else. She was patient and loving and completely devoted to James. But Jackson made sure she also kept teaching her drama classes, kept performing occasionally in local productions that some Bisbee residents had started organizing. Her art was part of who she was, and he never wanted her to lose that. Over the next few years, Jackson's ranch grew and prospered. He bought more cattle, hired a couple of hands, and gradually expanded the house to include more rooms. Tommy eventually left Mr. Hastings' employment to work for Jackson full-time, becoming not just an employee but a true friend. Marianne's drama program grew too, eventually moving to a dedicated space that some local businessmen funded. She directed plays, taught classes, and became known throughout the territory as someone who could develop real talent. Former students wrote to her from cities where they'd gone to pursue theater professionally, crediting her with giving them their start. 3 years after James was born, they had a daughter, Alice, who seemed to inherit both her mother's dramatic flair and her father's quiet strength. 2 years after that came another son, Robert, who was content and easy-going from birth. Life wasn't always easy. There were droughts that made ranching difficult, illnesses that struck the children and left Jackson and Marianne terrified, business setbacks that required careful management. But they faced everything together, and somehow that made even the hardest times bearable. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jackson surprised Marianne with tickets to a professional theater production in San Francisco. They left the children with Catherine, who had retired from touring and settled in Bisbee, and took the train west for a week, watching a play in a grand San Francisco theater. Jackson was struck by how far they'd come from that desperate afternoon when he'd saved Marianne from the coyotes. A decade had passed, and yet he remembered every detail of that day, Every moment of those first weeks when they'd fallen so improbably and completely in love. "You miss it?" he asked Marianne during the intermission. "The touring, the big stages, all of it." She considered the question seriously, looking around at the ornate theater with its velvet and gilt. "Sometimes I miss the excitement of it, the applause, the feeling of moving an audience. But Jackson, what we've built at home is worth so much more. Teaching children who might never have discovered theater otherwise, watching them grow and develop their talents, and having a real home, a real family, a real life with you. That's better than any stage. No regrets. Not a single one. You gave me something I didn't even know I was looking for, a chance to be authentic, to be real. All those years of playing roles, I was searching for truth in fiction. But real truth, real love, real life, that's what you showed me. You're more real than any role I ever played, and this life we've built is more meaningful than any performance." Jackson took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I love you. 10 years later, and I love you more than I did on our wedding day. I love you too. And I'm grateful every day that you happened to be mending that fence when I needed rescuing." "Best fence post I never finished," Jackson said, making her laugh. They returned to Bisbee refreshed and ready to dive back into their life. The children had missed them desperately, and Marianne spent the first day home just holding them close and hearing about everything they'd done while she was away. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but always moving forward. James grew into a serious young man who loved working the ranch with his father. Alice discovered a passion for teaching that rivaled her mother's love of performance. Robert turned out to have a gift with horses, able to calm even the most skittish animals with patience and soft words. When Arizona became a state in 1912, Jackson and Marianne were in their 50s, surrounded by children and eventually grandchildren. The ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in the area. Marianne's drama program had become an institution, sending talented students to professional theaters across the country. They were sitting on their porch one evening, much as they had on their first night in the house all those years ago, when Marianne said, "We've had a good life, haven't we?" "The best," Jackson agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible. Do you remember what I said to you that first week we met, about you being more real than any role I'd played?" "I remember." "I had no idea how true that would turn out to be, not just you, but everything we built together. This realness, this authenticity, it's been the greatest gift. Every role I played before was about pretending to feel things, pretending to live. But with you, I've actually lived. Really, truly lived." Jackson pulled her close, this woman who had transformed his life in ways he could never have predicted. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over land they'd built a life on, surrounded by the evidence of the love they'd shared for more than 30 years. Their story had started with a scream in the desert and a cowboy who happened to be nearby. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined: a partnership, a family, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. Students Marianne had taught would go on to inspire others. The land Jackson had built would sustain future generations. But more than any external achievements, they had each other. They had built a real love, the kind that weathered storms and celebrated joys, the kind that grew deeper and stronger with each passing year. As they grew older, they made sure to tell their children and grandchildren the story of how they met. The kids loved hearing about the coyotes and the broken buggy, about the line shack and the theater performances, about how two people from completely different worlds had found each other and built something lasting. "The important thing," Marianne would tell her granddaughter Sarah, who showed signs of inheriting the family's theatrical talent, is to be true to yourself while being open to change. I didn't have to choose between being an actress and being your grandfather's wife. I found a way to be both in my own way. Never let anyone tell you that you have to be just one thing. Jackson would add his own wisdom to their grandson Michael, who wanted to be a rancher like his grandfather. The best things in life often come when you're least expecting them. I was just trying to fix a fence that day I met your grandmother. Wasn't looking for love, wasn't looking to change my life. But when something real comes along, you have to be brave enough to reach for it, even when it's scary. In the spring of 1925, Marianne's drama program celebrated its 40th anniversary with a special production. Former students came from across the country to participate, sharing stories of how Marianne's teaching had shaped their lives and careers. The new theater in Bisbee, which had been built just 5 years earlier, was packed for the celebration. Marianne, now in her 60s and with silver threading through her dark hair, took the stage at the end of the evening. Jackson sat in the front row, exactly where he'd sat for that first performance in the Copper Queen Theater more than 40 years ago. "When I came to Arizona Territory in 1883, Marianne said to the assembled crowd, I thought I knew what my life would be. I was an actress, a traveling performer, and that was my identity. But then I met a cowboy who showed me that there were other ways to live, other ways to be. He saved me from wild animals that day, but more than that, he saved me from a life that was all performance and no substance. He showed me what it meant to be real, to be authentic, to build something lasting. Everything good in my life flows from that meeting, and I'm grateful for it every single day." The crowd applauded, but Marianne wasn't finished. "I've taught hundreds of students over the years, and I've always tried to give them the same gift my husband gave me, the understanding that art and life don't have to be separate. You can be an artist and still be grounded. You can perform and still be authentic. You can chase your dreams while building a real, solid life. That's the legacy I hope to leave." More applause, louder this time. Jackson stood and joined the ovation, proud beyond words of this woman who had chosen to share her life with him. That night, back at the ranch house that had been expanded several times over the years to accommodate growing families and visiting children, Jackson and Marianne sat together in their bedroom. "Quite a celebration," Jackson said. "It was lovely. But you know what I'm most proud of?" "What's that?" "This, us, our family. Everything we've built together. The theater program matters, and I'm glad it's helped so many young people. But you and our children and our grandchildren, that's my real masterpiece." Jackson kissed her forehead gently. "Ours, our masterpiece. I couldn't have done any of this without you." "We were good for each other," Marianne agreed. "We still are." They lived into their 80s, Jackson and Marianne, growing old together with the grace that comes from deep love and mutual respect. When Jackson died peacefully in his sleep in 1935, Marianne mourned him deeply, but took comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the life they'd built and the love they'd shared. She lived 3 more years, continuing to teach when her health allowed, continuing to share her passion for theater and her belief in the importance of authentic living. When she passed in 1938, surrounded by family, her last words were about Jackson, about how she'd see him soon, about how grateful she was for every moment they'd had together. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the desert they'd both loved. The headstone was simple: Jackson Xavier and Marianne Hartford Xavier, partners in life, united in love. Their children ensured that both legacies continued. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through generations, always successful and always managed with the integrity Jackson had insisted upon. Marianne's drama program evolved into a full performing arts center, training young artists in theater, music, and dance, always emphasizing the importance of authenticity and truth in art. The story of how Jackson saved Marianne from wild animals, and how she told him he was more real than any role she'd played became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It became a reminder that love can come when least expected, that being true to yourself is more important than any performance, and that building a real life with someone you love is the greatest adventure of all. The lined shack where Marianne had waited while Jackson fetched her trunk was preserved by the family, turned into a small museum of sorts with photographs and mementos from their life together. Couples would sometimes visit it, drawn by the romantic story, hoping to capture some of that same magic that had brought Jackson and Marianne together. And sometimes, on quiet desert evenings when the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, people swore they could feel something special in that place, an echo of the love story that had started with a scream in the afternoon and grown into a lifetime of devotion, partnership, and authentic, real love that needed no script and no pretense. Just two people who had found in each other exactly what they'd been looking for, even when they hadn't known they were searching at all.